When an avoidant meets a strong woman, something inside him shifts. Hess used to control, to running, to hiding behind his emotional walls, but this time, the game changes. Because she isn't chasing. She isn't begging. She is calm, confident, and completely grounded in who she is. At first, Hell tests her. Hell pull away to see if she'll collapse, but she doesn't. She simply lets him go, not from pride, but from peace. Because a strong woman knows love doesn't mean losing yourself. She doesn't cling, she doesn't over-explain, and she doesn't fight to be seen. She is seen by her own reflection, by her own strength, by her own light. The avoidant will start to wonder, why isn't she chasing me like everyone else did? And that's when the confusion sets in, because for the first time, his silence doesn't control the story. Hell feel her absence like oxygen leaving the room. Hell replay her words in his mind, the calm tone, the quiet confidence. Hell remember how she looked at him, not with desperation, but with truth. And that truth breaks something open in him. Because strong women don't just walk away, they walk away with grace. And that grace burns deeper than any argument ever could. She becomes the mirror has been avoiding all his life, the mirror that says heal, grow, or lose me forever. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, he faces the one thing he fears most: accountability. He can't run from her energy. It follows him in his quiet moments. It lives in the space between what he says and what he truly feels. And one day, Hell realized it wasn't her detachment that hurt him. It was the reflection she gave him that real love requires vulnerability, and he wasn't ready for it. Because when a strong woman walks into an avoidant's life, she doesn't destroy him. She awakens him. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, something powerful and uncomfortable begins to unfold. For the avoidant, who is used to control, distance, and emotional safety, this encounter feels like standing in front of a mirror that reflects back everything they try to hide. A strong woman does not chase approval. She doesn't shrink herself to fit someone's comfort zone, and she doesn't beg to be loved in fragments. Her energy is steady. Her self-worth is non-negotiable, and she demands emotional honesty not through words, but through the way she carries herself. This is where the avoidant starts to feel both drawn in and terrified. Because deep down, they recognize something they've never experienced before: someone they can't manipulate through silence or push-pull games. A strong woman doesn't crumble when an avoidant pulls away. She doesn't flood them with texts or over-explain her feelings. Instead, she steps back, not out of anger, but out of clarity. She understands that love cannot thrive where fear dictates connection. Her absence becomes louder than any words she could have said. This confuses the avoidant because they're used to people chasing, pleading, and trying harder to fix things. But when she doesn't, the dynamic shifts completely. Suddenly, the avoidant feels a new kind of tension, a tension born from respect and self-control. They realize that their usual defenses no longer work on someone who doesn't play emotional chess. In this space, the avoidant begins to feel something unfamiliar: accountability. For perhaps the first time, they see that their distance and detachment aren't signs of strength, they're shields. And the strong woman, by refusing to participate in their patterns, forces them to confront that truth. She becomes a catalyst for growth, not by trying to heal or save them, but simply by standing firm in her boundaries. Her strength isn't loud or aggressive, it's calm, grounded, and unwavering. She can care deeply and still walk away if she has not met halfway. That energy is magnetic. It awakens curiosity in the avoidant, though. Can someone be so loving yet so untouchable? So open yet so self-contained? What truly shakes the avoidant is the emotional independence she carries. She doesn't rely on external validation, and she doesn't fear being alone. For someone who runs from intimacy to preserve their autonomy, this becomes a paradox. They finally meet someone whose independence doesn't threaten them, but challenges them to grow. She becomes a mirror, reflecting both their potential and their pain. Her presence stirs their desire to connect, but her boundaries expose their emotional immaturity. And while the avoidant may initially retreat, something inside them starts to shift. They begin to see that real strength doesn't come from hiding, but from allowing oneself to be seen, flaws and all. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, the meeting itself is a test, a collision between avoidance and authenticity. She is not there to fix them. She's there to show them what real love requires: courage, vulnerability, and presence. And whether they rise to meet her or run away, one thing is certain: they will never forget her. When an avoidant meets what stings the most. While others in his past may have tried to pull him out of his shell, she simply refuses to climb inside with him. She holds space for connection, but will not force it. And in that stillness, he is left facing the one person he has spent years avoiding himself. Her mirror doesn't flatter. It doesn't soften the truth. When she looks at him, she sees the fear beneath his cool exterior, the longing hidden behind his silence. She sees the boy inside the man who learned that love was unsafe, that closeness meant pain, that being seen meant losing control. And by holding her ground, she silently asks him to reset or meet her where she stands, in honesty and emotional maturity. But for an avoidant, that request feels like walking through fire. Because for the first time, he can't hide behind excuses like, I am just busy, or I need space. She knows the truth behind those words, and her awareness unnerves him because it means his emotional armor is useless here. The more he resists, the more the mirror intensifies. Her patience is unsettling, her composure haunting. She doesn't argue when he withdraws. She lets him go, but not with bitterness, with understanding. And in that silence, he realizes something painful. Her lack of reaction exposes the emptiness of his defense mechanisms. The power he thought he had by pulling away now feels hollow. Her strength forces him to question the very identity he built on avoidance. For the first time, he wonders, what if she's not the threat? What if my own fear is? She doesn't need to fix him, because her presence already begins that process. She reflects what he could be if he dared to love without fear. In her reflection, he sees possibility, connection that isn't suffocating, intimacy that isn't control. But he also sees the gap between who he is and who he could become. That realization shakes him deeply, because when a strong woman mirrors an avoidant, she doesn't just show him who he is, she shows him everything has been too afraid to become. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, his old tactics begin to lose their power. The emotional games that once gave him control no longer have the same effect. Ghosting, withdrawing, delaying replies, and using silence as a weapon, these moves fall flat when faced with someone who refuses to be emotionally manipulated. A strong woman doesn't interpret his distance as a challenge to win. She interprets it as a boundary he has chosen, and she respects it. That respect, which he once craved from others but never valued when he had it, now becomes the very thing that unsettles him. Because her calm acceptance of his detachment removes the control he thought he had. When she doesn't react, panic slowly replaces confidence. The avoidant expects that pulling away will make her chase. He expects her to seek reassurance, to prove her worth, to fill the silence with desperate attempts to reconnect. But when she doesn't, his pattern collapses. He begins to feel the discomfort of his own emptiness. Her lack of response doesn't feel like rejection, it feels like reflection. The silence he once used as a shield now echoes back at him, forcing him to feel what has been avoiding all along: loneliness. A strong woman doesn't engage in emotional tug-of-war. She doesn't run after someone who walks away. Her energy is too valuable for that. Instead, she redirects her focus inward toward her peace, her purpose, and her boundaries. This confuses the avoidant because it's not the reaction Hes used to. Her indifference isn't arrogance, it's alignment. She understands that love without reciprocity is self-abandonment, so she stands firm, refusing to play a role in his emotional test. And as she does, the power dynamics begin to shift. The avoidant starts to realize that his tactics only ever worked on people who feared losing him more than they valued themselves. But this woman is different. She values peace over chaos. She values truth over attention, and that makes her impossible to control. He starts to question why her calm affects him more than anyone else's love ever did. It's because she mirrors what he secretly desires: emotional safety without dependency. She doesn't chase because she doesn't need him to feel whole. That independence exposes the weakness of his old patterns. As days pass, he may try to reassert control with subtle moves, texting randomly, showing mixed signals, offering small doses of attention to pull her back in. But she doesn't take the bait. She knows inconsistency isn't intimacy, and she no longer confuses crumbs for connection. Each time she doesn't react, his confusion deepens. He begins to sense that her silence isn't passive, it's powerful. It speaks of a woman who has mastered her emotions, not been mastered by them. The old rules don't work anymore because she's playing a different game built on self-respect, not survival. And when an avoidant realizes he can no longer provoke the reaction he expects, Hess left with no choice but to face the truth. The only person left to confront is himself. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, something begins to shift inside him, something he can't quite explain or control. For the first time, Hess standing in front of someone who doesn't chase validation, who doesn't crumble under silence, and who refuses to be emotionally manipulated. A strong woman doesn't play emotional chess, she operates from truth. Her power doesn't come from control, it comes from inner peace. And that peace shakes the avoidant to his core, because it exposes the emptiness of his defenses. Hess built his entire identity around control, distance, and independence, yet here stands a woman who embodies all three in their healthiest form. She doesn't need him to choose her. She's already chosen herself. This kind of energy makes an avoidant feel both drawn and terrified at the same time. Hess used to being the one who sets the emotional pace, the one who decides when connection happens and when it fades. But a strong woman doesn't bend to his rhythms. She has her own. When he pulls away, she doesn't chase, she pauses. When he gets silent, she doesn't beg, she observes. That confuses him because his entire emotional strategy depends on the other person reacting. When she doesn't react, the game ends, and Hess left face to face with his own emptiness. That's when the real shift begins. You see, strength in a woman isn't about dominance, it's about clarity. She knows her worth so deeply that she doesn't fear losing him. She's not trying to prove her value through persistence. Her power lies in her detachment, not the cold, heartless kind, but the kind born from self-respect. And the avoidant, for the first time, feels the mirror of what true independence looks like, not the lonely independence has clung to, but the peaceful kind that still allows connection without control. That's a revelation that silently challenges everything has believed about love. He starts to notice something strange. He can't stop thinking about her, even when she's not around. Her calm becomes louder than any argument. Her silence speaks more truth than his excuses. And that's because a strong woman doesn't teach through words, she teaches through energy. Her presence forces him to confront his fears, his need for control, his avoidance of vulnerability. He begins to feel something he hasn't felt before, admiration mixed with unease. Because deep down, he knows he can't hide from her. She sees through him, not to judge him, but to remind him that there's more to him than his fears. This meeting between the avoidant and the strong woman isn't just an emotional encounter, it's a spiritual collision. Her strength awakens something buried in him, the longing to be seen, loved, and accepted without running. But to have that, he must step out of his comfort zone. He must meet her where she stands in truth, in openness, in courage. And for a man who spent his whole life running from intimacy, that's both terrifying and magnetic. Because for the first time, Hess not running from pain, Hess running toward healing. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, something powerful happens when she finally steps back and stops trying to prove her love. Her withdrawal isn't cold or vengeful, it's peaceful, firm, and filled with quiet strength. She's not punishing him, she's protecting her energy. And that shift hits the avoidant deeper than any words ever could. Hess used to people chasing him, explaining themselves, trying to fix the distance he creates. But now, Hess met someone who refuses to play that role. When she walks away with grace instead of anger, the avoidant starts to feel something new, the weight of her absence. It's not just the loss of attention, it's the loss of emotional safety that she brought into his life. Her silence speaks louder than anything Hess ever heard. At first he might act like it doesn't affect him. Hell, tell himself he needs space, that it's for the best, that he's just not ready for something serious. But deep down there's an uneasiness he can't shake. Because the strong woman wasn't like the others. She didn't beg, she didn't cling, she didn't fall apart. She simply withdrew with self-respect, and that creates a haunting kind of energy that lingers in his mind. For the first time, the avoidant begins to see the difference between solitude and loneliness. His space, which once felt like safety, now starts to feel like emptiness. The peace he thought he wanted turns into silence that echoes her name. A strong woman's detachment doesn't destroy him, it awakens him. He begins to realize how much her energy grounded him, how her emotional stability gave him room to feel safe, even when he didn't admit it. Her strength gave his chaos direction. And now that she's gone, he feels the imbalance. It's not about control anymore, it's about recognition. He starts to see how his patterns of avoidance have cost him something real. Her absence becomes a mirror, reflecting back all the moments he pushed her away when she was trying to meet him halfway. The irony is that her silence teaches him more about love than her words ever could. This is where the emotional tables turn. The avoidant, who once believed he held the power by withdrawing, now feels powerless. The strong woman's detachment forces him to confront what he truly values. He begins to replay their moments together, her calm voice during arguments, her patience during distance, her ability to love without losing herself. And he realizes that her strength wasn't a threat. It was an invitation to rise higher, to love deeper, to break free from his fears. But she's no longer standing there waiting for him to realize it. In that stillness, the avoidant feels something rare regret, not the shallow kind that fades in a week, but the deep kind that transforms. Because for the first time, he understands what real connection felt like and what it means to lose it. The strong woman's detachment doesn't destroy his defenses, it dissolves them. It forces him to see that true strength isn't about avoiding pain, it's about facing it. And in that realization, the avoidant begins his slow journey toward awakening. Because her silence wasn't rejection, it was a lesson in self-worth, and the echo of that lesson stays with him long after she's gone. When an avoidant meets a strong woman, the final transformation happens when he realizes she was never trying to change him. She was simply showing him what real love looks like. Her love wasn't needy, controlling, or desperate. It was calm, consistent, and grounded in truth. At first, he couldn't understand it. He mistook her calm for disinterest, her independence for distance, her silence for rejection. But over time, something inside him begins to shift. He starts to recognize that her Oman who needed him, but one who chose him from a place of fullness. The strong woman's love acts like a mirror, reflecting everything he's afraid to face about himself, his fear of rejection, his belief that love leads to loss, his instinct to pull away when things get real. But as much as her presence challenged him, it also planted a seed inside him, the desire to grow. Even if he runs, even if he disappears into silence, he can't outrun that awakening. She showed him a kind of strength that didn't come from defense, but from authenticity. And that memory lingers. The avoidant starts to see that real intimacy isn't about losing control, it's about finding safety in honesty. Her ability to love without fear becomes a standard he can't forget. Time passes, and he begins to notice that no one else feels like her. No one has that same combination of warmth and boundaries, compassion and confidence. The women who come after might give him attention, but they don't make him feel safe. They don't challenge his patterns. They don't hold a mirror to his soul. And that's when the truth hits him. The strong woman didn't come into his life to comfort him. She came to awaken him. She wasn't there to make him dependent on her strength. She was there to remind him of his own. He realizes that her presence wasn't a coincidence. It was a crossroads. One path led to more running, more emotional walls, more temporary comfort. The other led to growth, vulnerability, and real connection. That realization doesn't happen overnight. It takes silence, regret, and self-reflection. But deep down, something changes permanently in him. He starts to crave the kind of energy she had grounded, steady, free. And he begins to understand that if he ever wants to experience that again, he'll have to become the kind of man who can meet that energy equally. The strong woman becomes his quiet inspiration, his emotional awakening, his turning point. She was the storm that broke his walls and the calm that showed him peace. And though she may never return, the mark she left on his soul remains. Because when an avoidant meets a strong woman, he doesn't just meet another person, he meets the version of himself has been running from all along. In the end, when an avoidant meets a strong woman, it's never just a relationship, it's an awakening. Two worlds collide, one built on fear and emotional distance, the other grounded in self-worth and inner strength. At first, this meeting feels like chaos. The avoidance instinct is to retreat, to regain control, to pull back into the safety of solitude. But what he doesn't realize is that her strength has already started to work on him. She doesn't fight his distance. She doesn't beg for closeness. She simply stands firm in her truth. And that truth begins to dismantle the walls has spent a lifetime building. Her energy reveals what his avoidance has always hidden, a deep desire to be loved, not for what he shows, but for what he hides. Her presence becomes a mirror to his soul. Every time he withdraws, every time he tries to detach, Hess faced with the reflection of his own fear. But this time, there's a difference. The strong woman doesn't react with pain or desperation. She responds with grace. She teaches him, without words,